So, as always, I have to answer, did I enjoy this episode? Yes. Was this the best episode we've gotten so far? No. But there are some really interesting things that happen in this that I would say would put this episode into people's top 3 of the season. Episode 8 had a lot of great moments for almost every single main character. But here, it feels like this is the second course to an already fantastic meal. It's not better, but it's just as good. One thing I will say is that the mood is entirely different after King Viserys' death, and we saw a bit of this in the last episode when Rhaenyra comes to the Red Keep, and it literally continues here, which I really like. It set the tone very nicely for a good chunk of the episode. The other thing about the episode that I enjoyed, and the show in general so far, is the differences in personality to characters in comparison to the book, specifically with Alicent. In the source material, she is rumored to have poisoned the king's wine to hurry him to death, and even instructed the guards and servants on what was to happen once the king did die. Here, she is less evil stepmother and more misguided parent, which I appreciate. I'm sure people will argue that she heard whatever it is she wanted to hear, but the way it's played off in this episode was done very nicely. Personally, I think one of the best scenes in the episode is the small council meeting, and we get a small taste of that in the preview, and yes, exactly what you think happens does happen with Beesbury, and it's done very well, though there are some smaller changes here. If you saw the preview, you'll see that Lord Commander Harold Westerling is present when he shouldn't be, among other minor differences, which I'll discuss in the spoiler review. But this scene came off as one of my favorites for the entire episode, possibly the whole series, mostly because of the small lore tidbits we get during it. Very well done. And the one character I would say stood out was Alicent's son Aegon. I know everyone has a boner for Aemond, and while he's cool in this episode, I feel like Aemond's purpose is just to be a Final Fantasy antagonist and just stand around looking pretty. And I can't shake the feeling that the showrunners just made him a younger Daemon clone, and you'll see what I mean in this episode, you kind of already saw it in the previews, but they really need to set him aside from that, especially in Season 2. But Aegon's conflicting feelings on the whole situation to crown him king was a surprise highlight for me. Once again, I know people want to clown on him and call him the Joffrey of the series, but he's more Draco Malfoy than anything, especially in the later Harry Potter films, which I appreciate. But at the same time, some of the crap that Aegon does and has done, and we'll see that in this episode, will make a lot of people dislike the character and the Greens in general. In fact, if I didn't know any better, I'd say this episode was written by a Rhaenyra fan with how bad the Greens come away in the end. But as always, I can't go into too much detail without spoiling the whole thing, but I did enjoy it quite a bit. The best parts being the small council stuff and the Aegon coronation scene, which in my opinion was very, very, very well done. In fact, I think it's one of the first few times we've ever seen a coronation for a king in the entire series. In Game of Thrones, I don't think we saw Joffrey being crowned, nor Tommen, nor any of the participants in the War of Five Kings. I think the only person we see have a crown placed on their head is Euron, and even then it was a cool ceremony bogged down by bad writing. But yeah, in the end, this episode was pretty great, and if you're wondering if there's anything in it that I didn't like, it's kind of the same situation with episode 8. Anything I disliked was so minor and minuscule that it's not even worth mentioning, but there was one character that I found kind of pointless, despite the fact that they have a big storyline in later seasons. I don't know if I can name them since I don't think they were in the preview, but I found myself questioning why the hell they were even included in the episode at all. You could argue to set up motivations for like future seasons, sure, but it still felt pretty pointless to have them in here. I guess you kind of have to give them something to do after they're in the promotional posters, but still felt pretty pointless. And of course, before we wrap things up, I did want to discuss the upcoming conflict between both factions in the show and how it relates to us as viewers picking sides. So someone on Discord sent me this YouTube comment from Peter Haynes, and it reads, I have always said the difference between Team Black and Team Green is that George R. R. Martin is slapping us in the face with deliberate values dissonance. The facts are that by Westerosi standards, Team Green is right, but their arguments repulse modern Westerners. They are essentially boys come first and Rhaenyra's children are bastards. Both are absolutely valid points in Westeros, but modern readers aren't scared of female rulers and aren't bothered by female promiscuity. So we support Team Black. We perceive them as fighting for our quote-unquote values. In reality, Daemon and Rhaenyra are just fighting for themselves. Now, Peter makes a very good point about how the Westerosi view it versus how we view it, but at the same time, so many complications come into play, specifically with the law. In the Ice and Fire book series, Stannis believes that Rhaenyra is a traitor and that she should have sided with her brother Aegon as dictated by law, that being that males inherit regardless, and that would be true of the Andals and First Men, but the Rhoynar, the people of Dorne, do things differently. So how come the Valyrians can't do the same? Jaehaerys I pretty much settled this before Viserys' ascension to king when he established the doctrine of exceptionalism, which allowed the Targaryens to continue the practice of incest without the country's religious powers getting angry over it. But it also laid out that because Targaryens are Valyrians and not from Andalos, where the Andals come from, there were different laws and traditions that they held to, which could include that of naming your heir. It's not unheard of, and as we've seen from the rhaenyra and Dorne, it's essentially established law, kind of, that Targaryens are above certain customs of Westeros. The other problem here is the oaths of every lord taken under this promise to swear to Rhaenyra as their heir to the throne, and this will actually come up in episode 9. But what is your honor, your duty to uphold oaths taken, even that of your fathers, versus the law? Funny enough, this is also something that Stannis goes against during Robert's rebellion. By law, he should have held true to his king, but instead he rose up in rebellion alongside his brother Robert. So in the end, what comes first? Your oath to uphold your word and allegiance, or the law, flawed as it is? And finally, to Peter's point, maybe Daemon is doing it for himself, and maybe Rhaenyra was in the original source material, but here, Ryan Condal has changed the characters quite a bit to make them more sympathetic, specifically with Rhaenyra and the dagger prophecy. It adds more urgency to her inheritance, though you could argue, why can't she just tell her brother Aegon about the dagger's importance? Well, can you really trust someone who'd usurp your inheritance to stay true to their word on anything? Even something as important as this? It really does come down to trust at the end of the day. How can you trust someone to hold true to their word when all they've ever done is some shady BS and scheming behind the scenes? But I'll let you guys argue that one out in the comments below. But guys, that is all for today. Thank you so much for watching. As always, please leave your thoughts down below and be sure to come back here to tell me what you thought of the episode when it airs. I may feature it in my next video. Also, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button if you haven't already. It helps out a lot. But once again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Have a good one.